Good evening, everyone. How are you today on this Wednesday? So nice to see you. Used to be Women Crush Wednesday. Remember that? Now it's just everybody's crushing it every day. Every day we get through is a good day, right? Yeah. So nice to see you here. Okay, you guys, I got out to the park today. Hey, Arlene, how are you? Not only did I get out to the park and we had our summer camp Looking is Learning in the park, I then went to the cathedral. It was just like a normal day in my life, except I wore a mask all day and was sweltering. But that's okay. That's okay. Not complaining. Before we start, because yesterday we were working on the color blue, so it seemed to me the most obvious choice was then to look at red. So I thought that would be fun today. But before we start, I want to share with you a cute little picture from the park. This is Dion with the kids. And this is right near Seneca Village, which is the first African-American enclave in the park. It's really one of the first neighborhoods for African-Americans. And then in about when Olmsted starts when they start to design Central Park, they evict all of this. It's a town of 230 people, 3 churches. There were people who owned their homes, African-American women who owned their own homes. Other people rented out their homes. They created such a community here, and I talked about to the kids that notion of irony, that what they deciphered from reading and looking at it is that they were a community of African Americans who were mostly working preachers, coachmen, coopersmiths who worked with barrels, domestic, all kinds of different jobs, owning their own home or renting their homes, creating 3 churches and such. So they're really living the American dream. We talk to the kids, what's the American dream? Faith, hard work, all of that. And yet they're evicted out to make way for a park that is the symbol of the democratic principles of the city, that we welcome all, that diversity is the key, and that the park is for everyone. So it was a really great teaching moment. We had a lot of fun with that. And then Dion showed up and it was just the best. Isn't that sweet, Arlene? Just really. And then we had crowds of people watching and wanting to jump in. I had all kinds of people doing his exercise. Yeah. That's a good question. I don't, Charles, were there any artists active in that village at the time? I don't know, because I don't think there's any artwork that's surviving from that. So that's a great question. So we're working on red today. Yeah, we worked on blue yesterday, and we ended with an amazing blue piece yesterday. I want to go back to that with the blue and red, because I really liked that. Yeah. You guys, it was like living normal life again today. It was like living normal life. Out in the park, then at the cathedral, and it's summer, so the cathedral's sweltering, the park is hot, everybody's out there exercising. And you guys, near the park, it's so funny because this one area we went to, you've kind of all of these muscle men, and they're all working out and such. And then Dion arrives, and he just kind of puts out those ballet arms, and everything pales in comparison. It's beautiful. So let's look at red. Okay, let's look at red, and let's talk a little bit about red. And I see we have quite a few people watching, but I'm only seeing a few comments. So please jump in at any moment, everybody. Red, writes historian Michael Pastoureau in Red, The History of the Color, is an archetypal color, the first color humans mastered, fabricated, reproduced, and broke down into different shades. As such, it dominated visual culture for centuries, including lipstick. It still does, right? With the advent of the Protestant Reformation, however, people began to view the shade as gaudy. Clearly, the Reformation meant nothing to me. Hey, Leslie, I was just thinking about you. Thank you for your nice comment on yesterday's piece. I know you really liked this Sassoferrato's piece, right? Yeah, good to see you. Yeah. So, okay. Um, People began to view it as gaudy, even immoral, and its preeminence began to fade. Today, both blue and green surpasses red as West's favorite color. But the bold hue, whether crimson, vermilion, cardinal, or scarlet, still retains power. Red artworks fetch the highest prices at auction. Oh, that's easy. I mean, that's interesting. Red is the color of revolution, of seduction, and its story is far from over. The scientists who last year announced the discovery of a new blue pigment, and this was written in 2017, so they meant in 2016, are now hunting for a never before seen red. From some of humanity's earliest cave paintings to Mark Rothko's immersive abstract canvases, let's take a look. All right. So let's take a look at right away at that cave painting because I really think it's extraordinary, right? Yeah. The cave painting. This is from Argentina and I'm drinking red wine. It's so appropriate tonight, right? So these images, it's interesting because in the cave paintings, often the people making the cave paintings would take charcoal. So obviously they're creating this and they would chew it and then blow on it and it would create their hand drawing. I love that. Yeah. So this is red ochre. So let's read a little bit about that. Red has been a part of our palette since the beginning of human history. Ochre, a naturally occurring pigment that is the source of earthy shades of brown, orange, and yellow, is red when it is a composite is composed of hematite. Am I saying it wrong, Jean? Saying it correctly? Neanderthals were using red ochre as far back as 250,000 years ago in a region that has since become the Netherlands. Some scientists believe that these early cultures applied the color to their bodies as decoration. Others think it may have been used in more practical ways, perhaps as an adhesive or a method of softening animal hides. Later, during the Upper Paleolithic period, early artists began employing the pigment as paint. The dusty red bison dotting the cave walls of Altamira in Spain are some of the oldest, dated between 20,000 and 14,000 BC. Yeah, I just did a whole class with the students about the caves of Lascaux, which was so much fun for them to learn. You're going to love this. Yeah, it does, Charles. It's kind of like, yeah, pay attention. It's red. It's calling out. Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. So look at this beautiful mural from Pompeii. By the time the pharaohs ruled Egypt, the number of reds used in art making had multiplied to include cinnabar. I don't know if anybody remembers it, but Estee Lauder made a perfume called Cinnabar that I loved. Okay. A natural mercuric sulfide that was also incredibly toxic. The mercury mine of Almeida, Spain, where Rome later extracted its cinnabar, was basically a death sentence for workers. Ancient Romans loved the brilliant red pigment, a preference reflected in its high prices during the time. Pliny the Younger wrote that cinnabar cost 15 times more than red ochre from Africa and was equal in price to the precious Egyptian blue. Gladiators who emerged victorious from the Colosseum might be smeared with the shiny red mineral and then paraded through the streets of Rome. Cinnabar is also prominently featured in the murals that grace the walls of upper-class villas in Pompeii. Cinnabar later became synonymous with the carved lacquer produced in China in the 12th century. Let me show you that. They're really beautiful pieces. And I'm sure you've seen them. The Met has a good collection of them. The Met is going to open August 29th, I think. Can't wait. Okay. These elaborately patterned luxury items, which could be anything from vases to incense holders, were typically covered with powdery red pigment that gave its name. Now, let's move on. Let me see what. Where are all my students here? I bet they're all asleep. We wore them out today. Yeah, it really is, Charles. It's amazing those caves have survived, right? You want to hear something interesting? When the cave in Lascaux was first found, right, it was found by this boy and his dog in the 1920s. Okay? The dog's name was Robot. My kids love to hear this story, right? The dog's name was Robot. He fell into a hole. They found the cave. By I think late in the 20s or something, or whenever it was, or 30s, I don't remember. Anyway, they secure the cave and they decide to open it to the public. It only took 20 years for them to destroy the cave by the public being there. So it's interesting that you talk about the lifespan of it. Untouched, the drawings lasted. Then they closed down the cave to tourists. And of course, yeah. Oh, I will, Charles. I'll do a special smart start from the museum. That's a good idea. Thank you. That's funny because one of my little students, her here as Boo Boo, she said, can't you do a smart start from the park? I could. All right. So let's look at this Albrecht Dürer. This is really beautiful, right? Like cinnabar, minimum, also called red lead, is a highly poisonous material. Scholars consider it one of the first synthetic pigments, with Romans heating white lead to extreme temperatures to produce the paint. Its eye-popping orange shade showed up well against marble and gold. Just hearing that reminds me of an Arlene Joseph painting, right? That eye-popping orange shade showed up well between like marble and gold, yeah. And it was often used for inscriptions. Later, medieval illustrators would employ the pigment in their illuminated manuscripts. But it was most popular with Mughal artists from India and Persia in the 17th and 18th century. So much so that their paintings became known as miniatures after the minimum that accented their work. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Let's take a look at this. I love this Albrecht Dürer piece. Look at the reds in this. It's really stunning. Really stunning. And then, we looked at Titian last night for his blues. Look at the red in this Titian. Look what it does to the brown of the dress next to, again, a Madonna and Child. So maybe Anne, maybe Elizabeth. But it's phenomenal. Jamie Ballet, how are you? So good to see you here, Jamie. So good to see you here. So we're talking about red. And look at this amazing Titian. Yeah, so great. Van Gogh was an avid user of red lead, a decision that has frustrated conservators centuries later. As it turns out, minimum whitens under light, and many of the Dutch painter's most famous works have seen their red accents fade over time. Very interesting. So this is kind of vermilion, the Titian red. This is where names start to get tricky. Ancient authors used the word vermilion to describe the pigment made from grinding up cinnabar. But vermilion also refers to the synthetic version of the color invented in China thousands of years before it was brought to the West by Arab alchemists during the Middle Ages. If this doesn't prove that we're all just one people and one, right? All of this cross-cultural exchange from the beginning, or as soon as trade could happen and people were from the beginning. Okay, this vermilion was used extensively by Renaissance painters, including Titian, who was renowned for his luxuriant reds. Although the pigment is normally an orangey red, when exposed to sunlight, it can darken to black. Vermilion became increasingly popular beginning in the 16th century, and the industry for the pigment boomed. First in Venice, later in the Netherlands, and in Germany. That's easy to see, right? You have that Renaissance after the Renaissance, but in the north, that northern exchange. It appears on shelves everywhere from hardware stores to apothecaries to paint shops. In the end, although it was pricier and less stable than minimum, Vermilion won out the battle of the Reds. I love that. The battle of the Reds. Titian won the battle of the Reds. Goodness, that is spectacular. And then, my friends, look who we brought in. Wait, the Raphael. Look at that Raphael red. And then, wait a minute, is that my Raphael red? Yeah. El Greco. Love the El Greco. Okay, cochineal bugs, never heard of them, were the third most valuable export from the New World in the 16th century, right behind gold and silver. These white pellet-shaped insects didn't look like much when attached to the pads of Mexico's prickly pear cacti, but when dried and crushed, they produced a vivid red hue that would take Europe by storm. Although originally a dye, cochineal was soon transformed into a paint called carmine. Is it carmine or carmine? Yeah, which took up residence in the 15th and 16th painters' palettes like Rembrandt, Anthony van Dyck, Rubens, and Vermeer among them. Yeah, and this is an El Greco piece. But I did have, oh, look at this Van Dyck, guys. Look at the red in this. Look at the red in this. It's absolutely stunning. You know, that's a good question. Do they glow? Are they radiant? That's a good question, Charles. I don't think so in the sense that you're looking at them. It persisted in the later centuries with artists including Turner and Gainsborough incorporating the paint into their works, although carmine produced a rich crimson glaze. That could be what you're talking about as radiant, often used on top of other reds like vermilion. It also had a tendency to fade in sunlight. The compositions of 18th century portrait painter Joshua Reynolds, fell victim to the phenomenon. His subjects look pale and ghostly today, more like marble sculptures than living beings. That's so interesting because you could really look at them as if he was trying to create that. I wonder then, my friends, because they talked about Gainsborough, if Gainsborough's figures, who are also so pale, if that's also a kind of side effect of that. Interesting. I have to look at that now. Okay, and then we have Matisse. Yeah, let's look at Matisse. It's a really nice piece. Okay, so Matisse. It would be several centuries before the next major innovation in red pigment came along. In 1817, a German chemist uncovered a new element, cadmium, which became the foundation of new shades of yellow and orange paint. But it wasn't until 1910 that cadmium red was available as a commercial product, offering, I lost my spot, offering an alternative to the traditional vermilion. Henri Matisse was the first major champion of the new pigment. Trying in vain to get his friend Renoir to make the switch. Like most Impressionist painters, Renoir was loyal to his original palette. And I think that has to do with the plein air technique. When Matisse loaned him a tube of cadmium red, the old painter responded, "It's very irksome to change," and promptly returned the paint. Don't you love that? Leslie said, such a stunning robe. Oh my God, I thought I saw Andrea Leon Talley's name. He would be so jealous of this. I sat in front of him. Oh my God, we always go to see Alvin Ailey, and it was like New Year's Eve, and we just went to see an Alvin Ailey performance, and Andrea Leon Talley was sitting behind me. It was just, he looked so gorgeous. And I said to him afterwards, he was wearing a fur muff to keep his hands in. "Can I have that, please?" Just, "You can't. You just can't." I said, "Yeah, I know I can't, but I just had to ask for it." But yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right, Leslie. I love that. So now let's look what happens after Matisse. I don't know where they put in this article that I'm reading, they kind of put this in, which I think is really funny. Will Ryman, the classroom, cadmium, right? What did Arlene say? Yeah, so true. Yeah. And then back to where we started last night, Rothko. Rothko, Lithol. In the late 1940s, Jackson Pollock started splattering commercial house paint across his canvas in huge, sweeping gestures. These iconic works offer a striking and high-profile example of artists' increasing experimentation with materials throughout the 20th century. Rothko, too, dabbled with untested pigments in his work with various results. In 1962, he incorporated two brand new organic reds into his palette for a series of murals at Harvard University. Those are those murals. Um, I, Leslie, I see your comment. That is hilarious. Thank you. It's true. If he were in front of me, he's very tall and wide. And sitting right behind him was Maya Angelou. So I'm nervous to have him behind me and then to have Maya Angelou behind him. And I'm sure he was nervous to have Maya Angelou behind him. And we're all sitting, and basically, come to find out, I'm watching Dion perform in Alvin Ailey. It all comes full circle, right? Yeah. So he incorporated two new organic reds into his palette for a series from Harvard. One of these pigments, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Lapthol, had no ill effects, but Rothko's other choice, Lithol, eventually doomed the works. Still in use today as a low-risk, low-cost ink in the printing industry, Lithol red is highly sensitive to light. After several years hanging it in the university's penthouse dining room, Rothko's deep reds and pinks have faded to light blue. By 1979, the paintings were so damaged that they had to be permanently removed. Wow, that's amazing. So these are all very damaged. So let's go back to our Rothko from yesterday, which the difference, you can see it. Yeah? Yeah, he did often use reds. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So that's our little history of red paint. I like that, the reds. And it's interesting. When I was studying, we all had this, when I was in my undergrad program, we all had this Bible for our museum methods program, which was the artist's handbook. And it was everything to do with paint and such. And it was so hard to read because it really got into the science of it and the chemistry of it and such. But I was really fascinated by why artists choose certain colors, how they choose them, the relationship to color, how the colors are made. I mean, it really is quite fascinating. Yeah, it really is. And so, and then do these colors last? And what happens to these works through generations of times and thousands of years? We see the cave paintings are still there. They were the only reason why the Lascaux cave did not do well was because of tourism. So they stopped tourism completely. And what they did was they created a cave. They kind of just created a fake Lascaux, so you could see those cave drawings, but you can't go into the real one. Yeah, Rothko's work didn't last as long as the handprints, right? And so that it's interesting because I deal with this. I had an artist that I was showing a while ago, and she's gone on to do some really great work and continues to. And a lot of her work is rose petals, flower petals. It's like, okay, what is the life expectancy of this? Are you using archival paper? Do we have archival glue? Will they fall? Because once we sell a piece of art to a client, we want it to last forever. That's a huge investment. So it brings up a lot of its own issues. Yeah. So I have another day at the park tomorrow, my friends, and tomorrow Song Shin will be joining us at Bryant Park. And Song Shin is in the middle of a very big commission for Disney World. I think that will be a massive wall of paper cuts, and it might be up for many, many years, 5 years or so. And I'm just so thrilled she'll be joining us in the park, and I think the kids will have a great time with that. So I'll bring you some images from that tomorrow. So thank you all so much for joining me. My mother was having phone issues with her phone, so she didn't join us today. But yeah, I will see you tomorrow evening, Thursday at 6. Thanks everybody so much. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.